The morning air was crisp and fresh as the sun slowly rose over the magnificent royal palace. Golden rays of sunlight painted the stone walls and tall towers in warm colors. Today was no ordinary day. It was the annual Royal Independence Day ceremony, one of the most important events of the year. Marcus Thompson stood perfectly still in his Royal Guard uniform. His dark blue jacket was pressed without a single wrinkle. His brass buttons shone like mirrors in the morning light. His black boots were polished so well that they reflected the sky above. He had been a Royal Guard for 5 years now, and he knew exactly how important this day was. Around him, 20 other guards stood in perfect lines. They all looked straight ahead, their faces serious and focused. Behind them, the palace grounds were decorated with colorful flags and flowers. Red, white, and blue banners hung from every window and balcony. The sweet smell of roses filled the air. Hundreds of important guests began arriving in fancy cars. Ministers, ambassadors, and wealthy business people stepped out wearing their finest clothes. Ladies in elegant dresses walked carefully on high heels across the cobblestone courtyard. Men in expensive suits adjusted their ties and checked their pocket watches. Marcus had trained for months for this ceremony. Every guard knew their exact position. They knew when to salute, when to march, and most importantly, when to stay perfectly still. Breaking formation during a royal ceremony was one of the worst things a guard could do. It could end a career instantly. The royal family appeared on the grand balcony above. The crowd below began to clap politely. Camera flashes sparkled like tiny stars as photographers captured every moment. Television crews positioned their equipment to broadcast the ceremony to millions of people watching at home. As the ceremony began, Marcus felt proud to be part of this important tradition. The royal band played the national anthem. Everyone stood with their hands over their hearts. The sound of hundreds of voices singing together echoed off the palace walls. But then Marcus noticed something strange. His sharp eyes, trained through years of security work, caught movement that did not belong. A man in a gray coat was moving differently from everyone else. While other guests stood respectfully in their assigned areas, this man kept stepping closer to the VIP section. Marcus watched carefully without moving his head. The man looked nervous. He kept looking around quickly, as if checking to see who was watching him. His right hand kept reaching toward his jacket pocket, then pulling away. This behavior made Marcus feel very uncomfortable. The man moved even closer to where the most important guests were standing. He was now only 15 feet away from the ambassadors and government ministers. Marcus could see sweat on the man's forehead even though the morning was cool. Something was definitely wrong. Marcus had seen this type of nervous behavior before during his guard training. This was how people acted when they were planning to do something bad. His heart began beating faster, but he kept his face calm and professional. The man reached into his jacket pocket again, but this time his hand stayed there longer. Marcus could see the outline of something hard and rectangular hidden inside the coat. It was too big to be a phone or wallet. The man's eyes were now fixed on a group of VIP guests, and his jaw was tight with determination. Marcus faced an impossible choice. His duty as a royal guard was to stay in position no matter what happened. Breaking formation during a ceremony was strictly forbidden. He could lose his job, face serious punishment, and bring shame to his family. But his duty as a protector of innocent people was even stronger. If this man had a weapon and Marcus did nothing, people could get hurt or killed. Important government leaders, innocent guests, even members of the royal family could be in terrible danger. The man took another step forward. His hand gripped whatever was in his pocket more tightly. Marcus could wait no longer. Without hesitation, Marcus stepped out of his perfect formation. He moved like lightning through the crowd of surprised guests. People gasped and pointed as the royal guard abandoned his ceremonial position. The beautiful ceremony turned into chaos in seconds. Judge Harold Whitman sat in the front row of VIP guests, his face growing redder by the second. He was a man who valued order above everything else. For 30 years, he had been known as the strictest judge in the entire region. Lawyers feared him. Criminals trembled when they heard his name. Even other judges spoke of him with respect and a little bit of fear. The judge had been personally invited to this royal ceremony because of his important position in the legal system. He wore his finest black suit with a silver tie that matched his gray hair. His shoes were polished to perfection, and his gold watch gleamed on his wrist. Everything about Judge Whitman was precise and proper. When Marcus broke from his position and rushed through the crowd, Judge Whitman felt his blood pressure rise. He watched in complete shock as the royal guard disrupted the most sacred ceremony of the year. The judge did not see what Marcus was chasing. He did not notice the suspicious man in the gray coat. All he saw was a uniformed guard destroying the dignity of a royal event. The crowd around the judge began whispering nervously. Some people looked confused and scared. Others tried to see what was happening. Children started crying as their parents held them close. The beautiful ceremony that had started so perfectly was now filled with chaos and fear. Judge Whitman stood up from his chair, his tall frame towering over the people around him. His sharp blue eyes followed Marcus as the guard tackled the suspicious man to the ground. Even from a distance, the judge could see some kind of struggle happening. Security officers rushed to help, but the damage was already done in the judge's mind. The royal band stopped playing music. The television cameras turned away from the royal family and focused on the commotion in the crowd. Millions of people watching at home were now seeing this disruption instead of the planned ceremony. Judge Whitman felt embarrassed for his country and angry at the guard who had caused this mess. Within minutes, additional security forces surrounded the area where Marcus had tackled the man. The judge could see them talking quickly and looking at something on the ground, but he was too far away to understand what had happened. All he knew was that a royal guard had abandoned his duty and created a scene that would be remembered for all the wrong reasons. The ceremony tried to continue, but the mood was completely ruined. The royal family looked uncomfortable on their balcony. Government officials whispered among themselves nervously. Foreign ambassadors shook their heads in disappointment. What should have been a proud moment for the nation had become an embarrassing disaster. Judge Whitman made a mental note of the guard's face. He would remember those features. He would remember the uniform number. Most importantly, he would make sure this guard learned a lesson about respect, duty, and following proper procedures. As the ceremony finally ended early, Judge Whitman walked to his official car with heavy steps. His driver could see the anger in the judge's eyes and decided not to make conversation during the ride back to the courthouse. The judge sat in silence, planning exactly what he would do about this situation. That evening, Judge Whitman sat in his home office surrounded by law books and legal documents. His wife brought him tea, but he barely noticed. His mind was focused on one thing. He used his connections in the legal system to find out the guard's name and address. Marcus Thompson would pay for his actions. The judge believed strongly that rules existed for good reasons. Military protocol, court procedures, and ceremonial traditions were not suggestions. They were requirements that kept society working properly. When people broke these rules, especially in public, they needed to face serious consequences. Judge Whitman spent hours researching the exact laws that applied to this situation. He found regulations about disrupting state ceremonies, abandoning official duties, and creating public disturbances. By midnight, he had prepared all the legal paperwork needed to teach this guard an unforgettable lesson. The next morning, Judge Whitman arrived at his courthouse earlier than usual. He signed the official citation with satisfaction, knowing that Marcus Thompson would soon learn the price of breaking protocol. Marcus Thompson sat at his small kitchen table, reading the official court document that had arrived in the morning mail. The paper felt heavy in his hands, not because of its weight, but because of what it meant for his future. The legal citation was written in formal language that most people would find difficult to understand, but Marcus read every word carefully. The fine was enormous. 3 months of his salary would have to be paid to the court system. For a royal guard who sent money home to support his elderly parents and younger sister, This amount was devastating. Marcus calculated the numbers in his head. After paying rent, buying food, and covering basic expenses, it would take him almost a year to save enough money to pay this fine. His fellow guards gathered around him in the barracks common room. They had all heard about what happened at the ceremony, and they were angry on his behalf. James Morrison, his closest friend and roommate, slammed his fist on the wooden table. "This is completely unfair, Marcus," James said loudly. "You saved lives yesterday. That man had a loaded gun and detailed plans of the ceremony. The security report proved you stopped a real attack." The other guards nodded in agreement. Sarah Chen, one of the few female guards in their unit, spoke up with frustration in her voice. "The newspapers are calling you a hero. The television news showed the weapon that man was carrying. How can a judge punish you for doing the right thing?" Marcus appreciated his friend's support, but he understood the situation better than they did. He had broken a fundamental rule of Royal Guard service. During ceremonies, guards were expected to maintain their positions, no matter what happened around them. There were proper procedures for reporting suspicious activity. He should have used hand signals to alert his supervisors instead of acting on his own. Captain Williams entered the common room with a concerned expression on his weathered face. He had served as a Royal Guard for 25 years and had never seen a situation like this one. The captain sat down across from Marcus and spoke in a quiet, serious tone. "I have been in meetings all morning trying to fix this problem," Captain Williams explained. "I spoke with Judge Whitman personally. I showed him the security footage, the police report, and witness statements. I explained that you prevented a tragedy that could have killed dozens of people." Marcus looked up hopefully, but the captain's expression remained grim. The judge refused to change his decision. He said that breaking protocol is never acceptable, regardless of the circumstances. He believes that allowing exceptions will encourage other guards to ignore their duties whenever they think they know better. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant for Marcus. A fine this large could force him to leave the guard service. Even if he managed to pay it, the official reprimand would remain on his record forever. It would be almost impossible for him to advance in rank or find better employment elsewhere. That evening, Marcus walked alone through the quiet streets near his apartment. The weight of his situation pressed down on him like a heavy blanket. He had always been proud of his work as a Royal Guard. The job provided steady income and respect in his community. More importantly, it allowed him to serve his country and protect important people. But Marcus had another side to his life that none of his fellow guards knew about. For the past 4 years, he had been attending law school 3 evenings each week and every weekend. While other guards spent their free time relaxing or socializing, Marcus studied contracts, constitutional law, and criminal procedures. His secret education had been incredibly difficult to maintain. After working long shifts as a guard, he would rush to evening classes that often lasted until midnight. He would then study for several more hours before getting a few hours of sleep and returning to guard duty the next morning. Marcus had told no one about his law studies because he did not want special treatment or questions about his commitment to guard service. He planned to finish his degree and then decide whether to continue as a guard or pursue a legal career. Now, facing this enormous fine and possible end to his guard career, Marcus realized his legal knowledge might be exactly what he needed. He made a decision that surprised even himself. Instead of accepting the punishment or asking his captain to fight it through official channels, Marcus decided to represent himself in court against Judge Whitman. The courthouse was buzzing with activity on the morning of Marcus Thompson's hearing. Word had spread quickly through the legal community that a Royal Guard was going to represent himself against the famous Judge Harold Whitman. Lawyers, court clerks, and curious citizens filled the gallery seats to watch what many expected to be a very short and embarrassing proceeding. Judge Whitman entered his courtroom wearing his traditional black robes. His silver hair was perfectly combed, and his expression showed complete confidence. He had handled thousands of cases during his career, and he expected this one to be simple and straightforward. A guard had broken protocol, caused public disruption, and now needed to pay the consequences. The prosecutor, a young woman named Lisa Martinez, sat at her table with a thin file of documents. She had prepared for what she thought would be an easy victory. After all, the facts were clear. Marcus had abandoned his post during a royal ceremony, and there were hundreds of witnesses and video footage to prove it. Then Marcus entered the courtroom, and everyone stopped talking. Instead of wearing his royal guard uniform, Marcus was dressed in a sharp navy blue suit with a crisp white shirt and conservative tie. He carried a large leather briefcase that looked expensive and professional. But most surprising of all was the way he walked and held himself. Gone was the stiff military posture of a guard. In its place was the confident stride of someone who belonged in a courtroom. Marcus approached the defendant's table and began removing documents from his briefcase. He had dozens of legal papers, case studies, and reference books. The other lawyers in the gallery began whispering to each other with surprise. This was not what anyone had expected from a simple royal guard. Judge Whitman watched with growing curiosity as Marcus organized his materials with the precision of an experienced attorney. When the bailiff called the court to order, Marcus stood and spoke his first words. "Your Honor, I am Marcus Thompson, and I will be representing myself in this matter. I would like to begin by entering a plea of not guilty to all charges." The judge was immediately struck by Marcus's clear, confident voice and proper legal language. This was not how most people without legal training spoke in his courtroom. Judge Whitman leaned forward slightly, his interest definitely aroused. "Mr. Thompson, do you understand the serious nature of these charges against you?" The judge asked. "Yes, Your Honor. I am charged with disrupting a state ceremony and abandoning official duties. However, I believe my actions were legally justified under the doctrine of necessity, and I intend to prove that today." A murmur went through the courtroom. The doctrine of necessity was an advanced legal concept that most law students struggle to understand. How did a royal guard know about such things? Marcus opened his first legal book and began his defense. "Your Honor, I would like to cite the case of Regina versus Dudley and Stephens from 1884, which established the foundation for necessity defense in English common law. This principle was further developed in the American case of United States versus Holmes in 1842. Judge Whitman's eyebrows rose high on his forehead. These were real legal cases, cited correctly with proper dates and legal authority. The prosecutor looked confused and began flipping quickly through her simple file, clearly unprepared for this level of legal argument. Marcus continued with growing confidence. "The necessity defense allows individuals to break minor laws when doing so prevents significantly greater harm to society. In the case of Vincent versus Lake Erie Transportation Company, the court ruled that emergency circumstances can justify actions that would normally be considered violations." The judge found himself taking notes, something he rarely did during simple hearings. Marcus was not just throwing around legal terms randomly. He was building a logical, well-researched argument using proper legal precedents and constitutional principles. "Furthermore, Your Honor," Marcus said, pulling out another document, "Article 4 of our national constitution guarantees citizens the right to protect innocent life when government authorities are unable to respond quickly enough. The Supreme Court case of Warren versus District of Columbia established that individual citizens have both the right and moral obligation to act when immediate danger threatens public safety." The courtroom was completely silent now. Even the experienced lawyers in the gallery were impressed by Marcus's knowledge and presentation skills. The prosecutor looked increasingly uncomfortable as she realized her simple case had become much more complicated than expected. Judge Whitman stared at Marcus with a mixture of surprise and growing respect. In 30 years on the bench, he had never seen a defendant without legal training demonstrate such sophisticated understanding of law and courtroom procedure. Judge Whitman called for a 15-minute recess, something he rarely did during simple hearings. The courtroom erupted in conversation as lawyers and spectators discussed what they had just witnessed. Marcus Thompson had delivered legal arguments that would have impressed seasoned attorneys, Yet he was supposed to be just a royal guard with no legal training. The judge retreated to his private chambers, his mind racing with questions. How could a security guard demonstrate such sophisticated understanding of constitutional law and legal precedents? Marcus had cited cases correctly, used proper legal language, and presented arguments with the confidence of someone who had spent years studying law. When the bailiff announced that court would resume, Judge Whitman made an unusual decision. Instead of continuing with the formal hearing, he looked directly at Marcus and spoke in a tone that was more curious than stern. "Mr. Thompson, before we proceed further, I must ask you a direct question. Where did you acquire such extensive knowledge of legal principles and case law? Your arguments today have been more sophisticated than those I hear from many practicing attorneys." Marcus stood up slowly, knowing that this moment would change everything. He had kept his secret for 4 long years, but now there was no point in hiding the truth any longer. He looked around the packed courtroom, seeing the curious faces of lawyers, court staff, and ordinary citizens who had come to watch what they expected to be a simple case. "Your Honor, for the past 4 years I have been attending Riverside Law School in the evening program. I am currently in my final semester and will graduate in 6 months with a concentration in constitutional and criminal law." The courtroom fell completely silent. People looked at each other with amazement and disbelief. A royal guard who was secretly a law student was something no one had expected to hear. Judge Whitman leaned back in his chair, processing this stunning revelation. "Are you telling this court that you have been working full-time as a royal guard while simultaneously pursuing a law degree?" "Yes, Your Honor. I attend classes 3 evenings each week and spend my weekends studying and writing research papers. I have maintained a grade point average of 3.9 out of 4.0, and I am currently ranked 3rd in my graduating class of 127 students." The prosecutor looked completely shocked. She had prepared to argue against a simple guard who broke protocol, not against someone who clearly understood legal principles better than she did. Her thin file of basic documents suddenly seemed very inadequate. Marcus continued explaining his situation. "I was raised in a working-class family, Your Honor. My father was a factory worker, and my mother cleaned office buildings at night. When I finished high school, I could not afford to attend college immediately. I took the Royal Guard position because it provided steady income and allowed me to support my family while saving money for education." Judge Whitman found himself genuinely interested in Marcus's story. "Why did you keep your legal studies secret from your fellow guards and supervisors?" "I did not want anyone to think I was not fully committed to my duties as a royal guard. I also did not want special treatment or to create problems with my colleagues. Many guards work second jobs or pursue other interests during their free time. I simply chose to pursue education instead of entertainment." The judge was impressed by Marcus's dedication and work ethic. Balancing a demanding job with rigorous legal studies required exceptional discipline and intelligence. Most law students struggled with their coursework even when it was their only responsibility. "Have you taken the bar examination yet, Mr. Thompson?" "I have taken and passed the preliminary bar examination, Your Honor. I am scheduled to take the final bar exam next month, immediately after graduation." This information stunned everyone in the courtroom even more. The preliminary bar exam was extremely difficult, and passing it while working full-time demonstrated remarkable ability and determination. Judge Whitman realized he was facing a completely different situation than he had imagined. This was not a reckless guard who had carelessly broken protocol. This was an intelligent, educated man who had made a split-second decision based on legal principles he clearly understood very well. The judge looked at Marcus with new respect and growing curiosity about how this case would proceed. Judge Whitman sat alone in his chambers after court adjourned, staring at the stack of case files on his mahogany desk. For the first time in decades, he felt genuinely uncertain about a legal decision. The Marcus Thompson case had become something completely different from what he had expected, and it was forcing him to question his own judgment in ways that made him deeply uncomfortable. The judge poured himself a cup of coffee from the silver pot his wife had given him 20 years ago. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted the cup to his lips. Harold Whitman was known throughout the legal community as a man who never doubted his decisions, never showed weakness, and never backed down from his rulings. But tonight, doubt was eating at him like acid. He opened his leather-bound notebook and began writing down the facts as he now understood them. Marcus Thompson was not just a royal guard who had recklessly broken protocol. He was an intelligent, dedicated man who had been secretly pursuing legal education while working full-time to support his family. He had maintained excellent grades, passed difficult examinations, and demonstrated legal knowledge that impressed even experienced attorneys. More troubling for Judge Whitman was the growing realization that Marcus's actions at the royal ceremony might have been legally justified. The necessity defense that Marcus had cited was a real legal principle that the judge himself had applied in other cases. When someone breaks a minor law to prevent serious harm to others, the courts often ruled in their favor. The judge walked to his bookshelf and pulled down several legal reference books. He spent the next 2 hours researching cases similar to Marcus's situation. What he found made his stomach feel heavy with regret. In case after case, courts had ruled that security personnel and ordinary citizens were justified in breaking protocol when doing so prevented violence or saved lives. Judge Whitman's phone rang, interrupting his research. The caller was District Attorney Robert Hayes, a longtime friend and colleague. "Harold, I heard about the interesting case you had today," Robert said with curiosity in his voice. "People are talking about the Royal Guard who turned out to be a law student. Is it true that he presented better legal arguments than most attorneys?" "It is true, Robert. I have never seen anything quite like it. This man has been working as a guard while secretly attending law school for 4 years. His knowledge of constitutional law is impressive. What are you going to do about the case?" Judge Whitman was quiet for a long moment. "I am not sure yet. I need to review all the evidence more carefully." After hanging up the phone, the judge continued his research into the actual events at the royal ceremony. He called the palace security office and requested copies of all incident reports, witness statements, and video footage from that day. What he learned made him feel even worse about his hasty decision to find Marcus. The suspicious man that Marcus had tackled was carrying a loaded pistol with extra ammunition. He also had detailed floor plans of the ceremony area and a list of important government officials who would be attending. Security experts who reviewed the evidence concluded that Marcus had likely prevented a mass shooting that could have killed dozens of people. Multiple witnesses confirmed that Marcus had acted quickly and professionally. He had not caused panic or unnecessary violence. He had simply identified a threat and neutralized it in the most efficient way possible. The disruption to the ceremony was minor compared to the tragedy that had been prevented. Judge Whitman realized that his pride and anger had clouded his judgment completely. He had been so focused on the breach of protocol that he had failed to investigate the heroic actions that had justified it. Marcus Thompson had not only acted legally under the necessity defense, he had acted heroically to save innocent lives. The judge spent the rest of the evening walking around his study, thinking about his reputation and career. He had built his success on being tough, consistent, and unwilling to bend rules for anyone. But he had also built it on being fair and following the law correctly. In this case, his desire to maintain authority had led him to ignore the very legal principles he had sworn to uphold. As midnight approached, Judge Whitman made a decision that would surprise everyone who knew him. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Judge Whitman's chambers as he sat behind his desk, preparing for what would be one of the most difficult moments of his legal career. He had arrived at the courthouse 2 hours early, unable to sleep after spending the entire night wrestling with his conscience and reviewing the evidence in Marcus Thompson's case. Judge Whitman had built his reputation on never admitting mistakes and never backing down from his decisions. For 30 years, he had been the tough judge who enforced rules without exception. Lawyers respected him, criminals feared him, and other judges looked up to him as an example of unwavering authority. But today, He was about to do something that went against everything people expected from Harold Whitman. At 8 o'clock sharp, Judge Whitman asked his bailiff to bring Marcus Thompson to his private chambers before the court session began. This was highly unusual, as judges rarely met with defendants privately, especially when they were representing themselves without attorneys present. Marcus entered the chambers wearing the same professional suit from the previous day. He looked calm but curious about why the judge wanted to see him alone. Judge Whitman gestured for Marcus to sit in the leather chair across from his desk, the same chair where he had lectured hundreds of defendants over the years. "Mr. Thompson, I asked you here because I owe you an apology," Judge Whitman began, his voice quieter and more humble than Marcus had ever heard it. "Yesterday, after hearing your defense and learning about your background, I spent the entire night reviewing the evidence in your case. What I discovered has forced me to confront some uncomfortable truths about my own judgment." Marcus listened carefully, unsure where this conversation was heading. He had expected the judge to be even angrier after their courtroom encounter, not apologetic. Judge Whitman continued, looking directly into Marcus's eyes. "I contacted Palace Security and obtained copies of all incident reports, witness statements, and video footage from the royal ceremony. I also spoke with the detectives who investigated the suspicious individual you apprehended." The judge paused, clearly struggling with what he was about to say next. "Mr. Thompson, the man you stopped was carrying a loaded firearm, with 60 rounds of ammunition. He had detailed floor plans of the ceremony area and a list of government officials who would be attending. According to security experts, you prevented what could have been a mass shooting that might have killed dozens of innocent people." Marcus remained quiet, allowing the judge to continue. "Furthermore, my research into legal precedents confirms that your actions were completely justified under the necessity defense doctrine. You broke a minor protocol rule to prevent imminent serious harm to others. This is exactly the type of situation where courts have consistently ruled in favor of defendants." Judge Whitman stood up and walked to his window, looking out at the busy street below. "I allowed my pride and my desire to maintain authority to cloud my judgment. I was so focused on the disruption to the ceremony that I failed to investigate the heroic actions that caused it. This was not just poor judgment on my part. It was a failure to uphold the very principles of justice that I have sworn to defend." When Judge Whitman turned back to face Marcus, his expression was filled with genuine regret and respect. "Mr. Thompson, when court convenes this morning, I will be dismissing all charges against you with prejudice, meaning they cannot be brought again. I will also be issuing a formal public apology for my hasty and incorrect decision to cite you in the first place." Marcus was stunned by this unexpected turn of events. He had prepared to continue fighting the charges, but he had never imagined that Judge Whitman would completely reverse his position. But the judge was not finished speaking. "Additionally, I would like to offer you something that I hope will help advance your legal career. Would you be interested in working as a law clerk in my chambers while you complete your final semester of law school? The position would provide valuable courtroom experience and allow you to continue your guard duties on a part-time schedule." Marcus felt his heart racing as he processed this incredible opportunity. Working as a law clerk for Judge Whitman would provide exactly the kind of practical legal experience that law schools could not teach in classrooms. Marcus Thompson accepted Judge Whitman's offer without hesitation, and within 1 week he began the most challenging and rewarding period of his life. Every morning at 7 o'clock, he arrived at the courthouse wearing his professional suits, ready to learn from one of the most respected judges in the region. Then, 3 afternoons each week, he would change into his Royal Guard uniform and report for duty at the palace. The other law clerks in the courthouse were initially skeptical of Marcus. They had attended expensive universities and came from wealthy families with connections in the legal world. Marcus was different. He was older, more serious, and had real-world experience that none of them possessed. But it did not take long for them to recognize his exceptional abilities and work ethic. Judge Whitman assigned Marcus to research complex legal cases and write detailed analysis reports. While other clerks struggled with difficult concepts, Marcus approached each assignment with the methodical thinking he had developed during his years in security work. He could identify important details that others missed and organize information in ways that made complicated cases easier to understand. The judge was impressed by Marcus's unique perspective on legal matters. When reviewing cases involving police procedures, security issues, or public safety concerns, Marcus could provide insights that came from his practical experience as a Royal Guard. He understood how law enforcement actually worked in real situations, not just how it was supposed to work according to textbooks. During their daily meetings, Judge Whitman found himself learning as much from Marcus as he was teaching. Marcus would ask thoughtful questions about why certain legal precedents had been established and how they affected ordinary citizens. His questions often forced the judge to think more deeply about the human impact of legal decisions. One particularly busy Tuesday morning, Marcus was reviewing case files when he noticed something unusual in a burglary case that was scheduled for hearing that afternoon. The defendant was a young man accused of breaking into several homes, but the police reports contained inconsistencies that suggested the evidence might be unreliable. Marcus brought his concerns to Judge Whitman, who initially dismissed them as the observations of someone still learning legal procedures. But Marcus persisted, explaining exactly which details in the police reports seemed suspicious and why they reminded him of problems he had seen during his guard training. That afternoon, when the burglary case came before the court, Judge Whitman paid closer attention to the evidence presentation. Marcus sat in the back of the courtroom, watching as the prosecutor presented what seemed like a solid case against the defendant. But following Marcus's analysis, the judge began asking pointed questions that revealed serious flaws in the police investigation. By the end of the hearing, it became clear that the defendant had been wrongly accused. The real burglar was someone else entirely, and the police had made assumptions based on incomplete evidence. Judge Whitman dismissed the charges, potentially saving an innocent man from years in prison. After court ended, Judge Whitman called Marcus into his chambers with a new level of respect in his voice. "Mr. Thompson, your analysis of that case was exceptional. You identified problems that experienced prosecutors and defense attorneys completely missed. Your combination of legal knowledge and practical experience is exactly what our justice system needs." Marcus felt proud of his contribution, but he remained humble about his abilities. "I just noticed things that seemed familiar from my security training, Your Honor. Police work and guard work have similarities." The judge nodded thoughtfully. "You have a natural talent for seeing details and patterns that others miss. This ability, combined with your legal education, could make you an outstanding attorney." As the weeks passed, their working relationship continued to strengthen. Judge Whitman began consulting Marcus on difficult cases, valuing his unique insights and analytical abilities. Marcus, meanwhile, gained invaluable courtroom experience and learned practical lessons about law that no classroom could provide. Their partnership was changing both men in ways neither had expected when they first met in that contentious courtroom hearing. 6 months after that fateful day when Marcus Thompson first entered Judge Whitman's courtroom as a defendant, he walked across the stage at Riverside Law School wearing a black graduation gown with gold honors cords draped around his shoulders. The auditorium was packed with proud families, but in the front row sat an unexpected guest who had become like a father figure to Marcus during their time working together. Judge Harold Whitman applauded loudly as Marcus received his law degree with highest honors, graduating second in his class of 127 students. The judge felt a deep sense of pride watching this remarkable young man achieve his dreams through years of dedication and sacrifice. Their partnership had transformed both their lives in ways neither could have imagined. 3 weeks later, Marcus received the results of his bar examination. He had achieved one of the highest scores in the state's history, earning recognition from the State Bar Association and several job offers from prestigious law firms. But Marcus had already decided what he wanted to do with his legal career. Instead of joining a big corporate law firm where he could earn lots of money, Marcus chose to open his own small practice, specializing in cases involving public safety, constitutional rights, and law enforcement issues. His unique background as both a royal guard and legal scholar gave him insights that no other attorney possessed. Judge Whitman helped Marcus find office space in a building near the courthouse. The judge also referred several clients to Marcus, knowing that his former clerk would provide excellent representation for people who needed help navigating the complex legal system. Marcus's first major case involved a security guard who had been fired for stopping a robbery at his workplace. The company claimed the guard had violated policy by intervening instead of calling police and waiting for help. Using the same necessity defense principles he had argued in his own case, Marcus successfully proved that the guard's actions were legally justified and morally required. Word spread quickly through the legal community about the brilliant new attorney who specialized in cases involving security personnel and public safety workers. Marcus began receiving calls from police officers, firefighters, emergency medical technicians, and security guards who faced discipline or legal problems for making split-second decisions in dangerous situations. Judge Whitman watched Marcus's success with tremendous satisfaction. The harsh, inflexible judge who had once fined Marcus for breaking protocol had learned valuable lessons about fairness, understanding, and the importance of looking beyond surface appearances. Their initial conflict had taught him to be more thoughtful and compassionate in his judicial decisions. The judge began incorporating Marcus's perspective into his own courtroom practices. When cases involved law enforcement officers or security personnel, Judge Whitman would consider not just whether rules had been broken, but whether the circumstances justified those actions. He started asking more questions, gathering more evidence, and thinking more carefully about the human elements behind each legal situation. Marcus often appeared before Judge Whitman representing clients, and their professional relationship continued to benefit both men. The judge valued Marcus's well-researched arguments and ethical approach to legal practice. Marcus appreciated the judge's willingness to listen carefully and consider all aspects of complex cases. Their story became legendary throughout the legal community as an example of how conflicts can lead to understanding and growth. Law schools began using their case as a teaching example of how the justice system works best when people are willing to admit mistakes, learn from each other, and focus on fairness rather than rigid rule following. Marcus Thompson had started as a royal guard who broke protocol to save lives. He had become a respected attorney who helped others navigate the legal system when they faced similar impossible choices between following rules and doing what was right. Judge Harold Whitman had started as a strict judge who valued authority above all else. He had become a wiser, more compassionate jurist who understood that true justice required both strength and flexibility. Their partnership proved that even the most unlikely relationships can lead to extraordinary outcomes when people are willing to see past their differences and work together toward common goals.